So if you went to the Singapore Motor Show, the first thing you would have seen is a whole bunch of new or newish brands, specifically Chinese EV brands like Zeekr and Xpeng. But tucked away in its own room on the third floor was another new brand you might not have heard of, and that's Deepal. I think its entry to Singapore is a great example of how car buyers here are faced with more brands to choose from than ever, with still more on the way. And frankly, it's getting a little bit confusing. So in this video, I want to talk about how to make sense of the new brands from China using Deepal as an example. Point number one, some new brands are actually newer than others. Generally speaking, Chinese brands are divided into startups and new labels from older car makers. The most famous startups are probably brands like Li Auto, NIO, and Xpeng, and these are usually led by visionary founders who have their own view of how to change the world of cars. Then you have new brands by the big established car makers. For example, Zeekr is owned by Geely, which also owns Volvo, Lotus, and a whole bunch of other brands, some old and some new. And what about Deepal? Well, the S07 behind me was actually co-developed by CATL, a battery giant, Huawei, which is an electronics giant, and Chang'an Automobile, which has actually been building cars for something like 40 years. The second point, size does matter. So one important thing to look out for is size, and generally speaking, a car maker needs to build something like 400,000 cars a year just to be viable, and even then it's only one or two bad products away from getting into financial trouble. So if you want to feel safe, look for a car from a group that comfortably sells around 800,000 cars a year. And if you look at Chang'an, well, it manufactured just under 2.7 million vehicles in 2024, more than 2.2 million from its own brands and the rest for other brands. And that would put Deepal in the safe zone. Point number three, look for something that appeals to you. Chinese EVs are getting famous for delivering value for money. They tend to have a lot of space, a lot of power, and a lot of features. But they're also in danger of feeling a little bit homogeneous. So beyond the first 2 points I mentioned, you might want to look for brands that kind of think outside of the box a little bit. Like how the Zeekr Mix has balcony doors on one side of the car and a living room configuration inside. I have a video on that car you can check out. But looking at the Deepal S07, one of the things that really caught my eye is just how big the frunk is and how it packs so much space in the interior, even though it's not super big outside. There's also the E07, which is a sleek-looking SUV that turns into a pickup truck. That's really kind of cool, and it does show how some Chinese car makers are really thinking hard about what customers would like in the new era of cars. Believe it or not, that car is coming to Singapore, and as for Deepal itself, well, its importer Premium Automobiles is going to open a showroom here in March, and that's when I'm going to get to drive this car and make a video about it. So those are some simple things to keep in mind when you come across a new brand from China. What features does it have? How does it stand out? And while it's natural to think about when this car or that car is coming to Singapore, it's also important to keep in mind who's behind the brand and how it actually got to Singapore. I happen to know that Premium Automobiles actually decided against bringing in 2 other Chinese brands to Singapore, but they were very comfortable with the idea of Deepal and confident in the brand for our market. And I think there's a lesson in there for us. The major serious car dealership groups here are actually quite discerning about new Chinese brands, and you should be too. So those are my quick tips on what to look out for when you're thinking about a new brand, but we do have videos that explain what the new brands do and what some of them have to offer. So feel free to check those out. Meanwhile, if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing. We are a new channel and we could totally use your support. Thanks for watching this video. Check out our other vids as well. That's it from me. See you again.
You look very naked.
Point number one.
Hello.
Okay. All right, this is the last one. My caffeine's wearing off. Okay.